This is Mark Gatford for the Sportsman. We're here in London and we have the pleasure of being joined by Professor Michael Graham, the Chief Medical Officer of the British and Irish Boxing Authority. How are you today, Michael?
Very well, thank you. How can I help you?
So, Nigel Benn coming back at the age of 55. Talk to me about the extensive testing that's been put in place to ensure the risk has been minimised of him boxing at this later period of his life.
Well, Nigel never actually stopped training. He's been involved with BIBA for several years now, and we've done recurrent tests, scientific testing, physiological testing on VO2 max, which is a measure of maximal oxygen uptake in litres per minute. We've done blood tests to show that his blood tests are within normal parameters, and we've done MRI scans to show that his brain function is satisfactory and that his cognitive function is fine as well, with specific cognitive function tests.
So how would you sort of describe his physical condition? Because I know you mentioned he has a sort of his chronological age maybe different to his physiological age.
Yeah, well, basically, Nigel finished boxing about 23 years ago and has maintained his fitness ever since. As you're probably aware, exercise is one of the biggest prevention factors for diminishing aging. From the age of 20 onwards, we produce about 14% less per decade of a hormone in the body that's produced by the pituitary called growth hormone. Growth hormone is produced by the anterior pituitary. It goes to the liver and produces another hormone that is very, very anabolic, and the anabolic effect of that hormone is it increases the muscle mass and strength. Growth hormone does as well. Now the thing is, exercise above 60% VO2 max, which is the maximum oxygen uptake, that increases the production of growth hormone. So the fact that he has carried on training has slowed down his aging. As I say, you can't stop it completely, and other hormones like your testosterone levels, the other hormones that like maintain the cell structure and function, they are diminished by about 10%. And your VO2 max is diminished by 10% in not only sedentary individuals but also athletic individuals. So you can't stop the aging process, you can only slow it down. But obviously Nigel has wonderful genetics as well. Obviously black people tend to have very fast twitch fibres, and obviously that's why Nigel at his peak was knocking people out for fun. So he's maintained that. We do these stringent tests, which I did mention, yes? Yeah. And basically, they show that his level of fitness is certainly at least 15 years younger than his chronological age. So his physiological age is at least 15 years less than his chronological age. Now, the important thing is, you look at some of the boxers who are fighting today at heavyweight level, they're clinically and morbidly obese. They're granted licenses. I wouldn't let them fight on my front lawn in my house with my chickens. I've got chicken coops there. But the thing is, they are granted license by other sanctioning bodies. So I don't think that we can be criticised for supporting Nigel's desire to fight again.
Talk to me about those heavyweights then, just for, as an example. Have you got anyone in mind who you sort of look at and think you should be getting a license?
I don't want to criticise anybody, but all the big heavyweights. I mean, you look at someone like Deontay Wilder. He's an image. He's an Adonis. He's a picture of perfection. You look at someone like Anthony Joshua. The guy is a beast. He's stripped. He's shredded. He's super duper fit. He gets in the ring and he fights Andy Ruiz Jr. Now, there's a lot of controversy surrounding the history of that event. However, nobody would have given Andy Ruiz Jr., who looks physiologically about 50 years of age, 100 to 1. My own son bet on Andy Ruiz Jr. 100 to 1 and won 100 quid. He put £1 on him. Who would have thought that result? But there's an example. And you could look at someone like Tyson Fury, who's a wonderful, wonderful boxer, and there's no doubt about that. But clinically, and he's morbidly obese.
So what are the reasons why you mentioned the names there? Wilder, Joshua, Ruiz and Fury, clinically obese. Why is that an issue?
Well, because they're producing less growth hormone, because otherwise they wouldn't be trimmed, because growth hormone is the hormone that controls your metabolism, your endocrine metabolism, which controls your body fat. It converts central to peripheral fat, it lowers your body fat levels, so they're producing less, so they're going to age quicker. They're going to be at risk of type 2 diabetes, which then causes you get what's called insulin resistant. You get increased levels of production of cholesterol, which is deposited in arteries, and they certainly promote aging, senescence. So that's the reason. They're physiologically a lot older than a chronological age.
And does that make them more susceptible to getting a trauma in the ring?
Well, I think, at the end of the day, I mean, I used to do a lot of boxing up until the age of 31, and I got concussed just by one lucky blow at the end of a round when the bell rang. And certainly, so one lucky blow in that case concussed me. I was dazed and dizzy for a week. I was walking around like a zombie. I was depressed and had headaches for 3 months. That happened in boxing. The same happened to me in rugby. The same happened to me in cycling. So basically, I was a young man when those injuries were happening. Now, the thing is, if you catch someone right, it doesn't matter who it is, they're going to go. The temple, but people don't realise the temple overlies the middle meningeal artery. That bone there is eggshell thin. You hit someone right on the temple, and they tend to go out like a light. And then you could fracture that temple bone in the temporal region, and you could die within 12 hours if you have a middle meningeal artery laceration and an extradural hemorrhage.
Andy Ruiz Jr. caught Joshua very high in that fight. It looked to be around the temple. What happens to the body? Because Joshua, he couldn't recuperate, and he was eventually stopped. What happens to the body? What happened to AJ's body when he got caught high?
Well, basically, obviously, he was hit in several points, actually, not just at the temple, but it did look like one of the main principal punches was a blow to the temple. I think he was hit around the back of the ear as well. So you got the cerebellum at the back, which holds up your balance. A blow to the temple region will cause an acute concussion, and so even his own trainer subsequently has said he knew he was concussed and should have called him out to the ring earlier. Obviously, because of his history, the fact he was holding so many belts, it was such a big event, he let him carry on, hoping he'd make a recovery. He wasn't able to make that recovery. But you look at a more recent fight than the Joshua Ruiz fight, Sergey Kovalev against our own Anthony Yarde. Now, in actual fact, how Sergey Kovalev recovered, he was seconds away from being stopped. The bell went too soon for Yarde to become a world champion. Sergey Kovalev in 1 minute managed to recoup his energy and overcome those blows to the head where he looked off balance and come back and win. And that's happened again. You look at someone like Nigel Benn when he beat Gerald McClellan. Nigel Benn was through the ropes, and he by his own confession, he said, my trainer, my coach, my seconds, my coach in the corner told me I'd had a great round. I didn't know what had happened. I thought I'd had a great round because he told me I would believe anything that came out of his mouth. I got back in the ring and stopped Gerald McClellan. Ended Gerald McClellan's life to all intents and purposes. I've actually met Gerald McClellan. He really is a shadow of a man, and sadly. But the truth of the matter is that these acute injuries to the head can happen in any sport, not just boxing, but also equine, for example, point to point even. Those riders, they try and jump back on the horse with concussions, but you try and stop them, it's almost impossible.
Should AJ have been pulled out?
Well, it's a difficult one to see. I think the thing is he pulled himself out in the end, didn't he? He just walked and turned his back. There's other fights. I don't know if you remember a fight, a former Welsh Commonwealth title holder. He fought at lighter weight, and he turned his back without even being hit, having floored one of the former world champions. And he just turned his back. He hadn't even been hit, and the referee stopped it. But certainly I think the referee did the right thing. I think Anthony Joshua decided to stop the fight himself by turning his back, and I think certainly the referee did the right thing. It could have been stopped sooner. A lot of fights, I think, sometimes should be stopped sooner because of risk to further damage. But it's always a difficult one. Unless you're actually in the ring with the fighters, it's difficult to see and make an assessment.
And just finally, just going back to another fighter again, Tyson Fury, you said that this is a clinically obese man who is, he's got himself into better shape now.
He is a better shape, but if you look at what he was like when he first came back in his first fight, after all his problems, you know, medically speaking and physiologically speaking, the chap wasn't in the best of shapes.
Yeah.
And yet we know that the guy is probably one of the best heavyweights on the planet. Now, who would not give him a license? Well, he has been given a license. He was in dispute, obviously, with the British Boxing Board of Control, but eventually they decided to give him a license, grant him a license, and he. I mean, should he have been pulled out of that fight when he got floored by Deontay Wilder? It's a difficult one, isn't it, really? Because how he got up from that, heaven only knows.